The rain came down in heavy, angry sheets that night, the kind of rain that made Lagos feel like the sky itself had turned against you. But for Amara, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one happening at the front gate of the Adeyemi mansion. Hold her. Don't let her run. The voice cut through the downpour like a blade. Madame Adeyemi stood at the top of the front steps, her silk wrapper soaked, her face twisted with rage. Two male gatemen dragged Amara by her arms across the marble courtyard, her slippers scraping desperately against the wet tiles. Her uniform was drenched. Her braids were plastered to her face. And her eyes were wide with the kind of terror that only comes when you realize no one is going to help you. Search her bag. Search it now. Madame screamed, pointing a jeweled finger. One of the gatemen yanked the small bag from Amara's shoulder and turned it upside down. Lip gloss. A small Bible. A picture of a woman she barely remembered. And then, with a sound that would haunt her for years, something small and brilliant hit the tiles and caught the light. The diamond necklace. Gasps erupted from the cluster of staff who had gathered to watch. Amara stared at it like it was a snake. Her mouth fell open. I didn't take it. Her voice cracked. Please, I didn't. I would never, please, you have to believe me. Madame Adeyemi walked slowly down the steps, her eyes cold and certain. Thief, she said quietly. You came into my house. I fed you. I gave you work. And this is what you do. Madam, I swear on my life, I didn't touch that necklace. Someone put it there. Please. The slap came fast. The crowd went silent. Get her out of my compound, Madam said, turning her back. And if I see your face near this gate again, I will call the police and make sure you rot. The iron gate slammed behind Amara with a sound that seemed to echo across the whole street. She stood alone on the wet road, the rain swallowing her whole, her bag empty at her feet. And for a long moment, she didn't move. Because this was not the first time the world had thrown her out. It was just the latest. To understand Amara, you had to go back to the beginning, to a small, crowded government orphanage in Suralere where she had grown up sleeping on a thin mat in a room with 11 other girls. The orphanage smelled of boiled beans and bleach. The paint on the walls peeled in long, sad strips. And the children there learned early that kindness was not something you could count on. The older kids called her nobody's child. Not because it was original, half the children there could claim the same title, but because something about Amara seemed to attract cruelty. Maybe it was the way she looked directly at people when she spoke. Maybe it was the quiet seriousness in her eyes that made some people uncomfortable. Whatever it was, she was a target. Nobody chooses girls like you, a bigger girl named Saad told her once, plaiting her own hair in the cracked mirror they all shared. You're too dark, you're too quiet, and you have no family. You'll end up a house girl somewhere and die poor. The caretaker, a tired woman named Mama Ease, had once sat Amara down and said with a kind of bleak practicality, "You are a smart girl. But smart doesn't feed you in Nigeria. Start learning how to cook and clean properly, because that is the life waiting for you." Amara had not cried when Mama Ease said that. She had just nodded. Because by the time she was 14, she had already accepted one painful truth that lived like a stone in her chest: no one ever believed her. When things went missing in the orphanage, eyes turned to her first. When there was trouble, she was the easiest one to blame. And every time she opened her mouth to defend herself, she saw the same expression on adult faces, that slow, tired dismissal that said your words don't matter here. So she grew up. She left the orphanage at 18 with 3 dresses, 4,000 naira, and that same stone in her chest. She cleaned houses in Yaba, ran errands in Ikoyi, and saved every kobo with a ferocious discipline that people mistook for coldness. She had one dream, and she held on to it the way a drowning person holds onto a piece of wood, tightly, desperately, because letting go meant sinking. She wanted to go to university. She wanted to study and become something. She wanted, more than anything, to become someone whose words could not be dismissed. When the job at the Adeyemi mansion came through a placement agency in Victoria Island, Amara had stood in the small bathroom of her rented room in Mushin and stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. She was 22. She was thin and serious and still carried that old wound in her eyes. But she had also learned how to iron a uniform until it had edges sharp as glass. She knew how to work. "This is my chance," she whispered to herself. "Just keep your head down. Work hard. Save money. Get out." The Adeyemi mansion in Lekki Phase 1 was the kind of house that made you feel small just by looking at it. 3 stories of cream-colored marble. A gate so high it blocked out the evening sky. Perfectly trimmed hedges. A fountain in the courtyard that ran day and night, even during NEPA blackouts, because the compound had its own generator. Amara had walked through that gate on her first morning and thought, this is what money looks like when it stops trying to prove itself. Madame Adeyemi had received her in the sitting room without looking up from her phone. "You are the new one," she said. "Not a question. You will clean the upper floors. You will not enter the master bedroom unless I call you. You will not touch anything you are not instructed to touch. Do you understand?" "Yes, Ma." "Good. Ngozi will show you the rules." Ngozi was the head housemaid, a sharp-faced woman from Enugu who had been at the mansion for 6 years and wore that fact like a crown. She showed Amara around with the energy of someone doing her a great inconvenience, pointing at rooms and rattling off instructions in a rapid-fire Igbo-accented English that left no space for questions. The other staff were no warmer. There was Blessing, who smiled too much and said nothing real. There was Emeka the cook, who looked through Amara like she was made of glass. There was Tun the driver, who was friendly enough until Ngozi shot him a look, after which he found other things to look at. And then there was Toby. Toby Adeyemi was 26, the only son of the billionaire Chief Adeyemi, who was often abroad. He drove imported cars, wore clothes that cost more than Amara made in a year, and had eyes that were too still and too watchful for a man who was supposed to have nothing to worry about. He noticed Amara on her second day. Not in the way that would make you call security, but in the way that made the back of her neck prickle. Like he was calculating something. "You're from an orphanage," he said to her once, not as a question, leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen while she mopped. "Yes, sir." He said nothing else. But the way he looked at her before he walked away made her feel like she had just been filed somewhere in his mind under a label she didn't want to read. The trouble started in small ways, as trouble always does. A vase was knocked over on the second floor, and Ngozi told Madam it was Amara, even though Amara had been in the laundry room at the time. A guest's handbag was moved from one chair to another, and somehow Amara was asked to explain it. A tray of drinks was spilled at the bottom of the staircase, and before Amara could even say a word, Blessing had already told the story with herself as the innocent witness. She bore it. She swallowed every accusation with the practiced silence of someone who had long ago learned that protesting made things worse. But inside, that old wound was reopening, millimeter by millimeter. One afternoon, she was dusting the upper hallway when she heard Ngozi and Blessing talking in the linen room, not bothering to lower their voices. "I don't trust her," Ngozi said. "She's always watching. Always looking around like she's studying the place." "Orphans are natural thieves," Blessing replied. "You know this. They grow up with nothing, so they never stop looking for what they can take." Amara stood in the hallway with the duster frozen in her hand. Her throat tightened. She did not cry. She had not cried since she was 16, not because she was hard, but because crying had never once changed anything. She finished dusting. She went back downstairs. She kept her head down. 2 weeks into the job, Chief Adeyemi's associate hosted a dinner party at the mansion, the kind that started at 7 in the evening and involved men in Agbada and women in heavy Ankara and Geli, drinking expensive wine and talking loudly about money. Amara had been recruited to help serve. She moved through the dining room with a silver tray, her footsteps quiet, her eyes straight ahead. Madame Adeyemi was in a dazzling mood that night. She wore a beaded gown and her best jewelry, including the necklace, a thin gold chain that held a diamond pendant the size of a thumbnail, brilliant and cold as starlight. She showed it off with the easy confidence of a woman who had never once worried about keeping the lights on. "It was a gift from my husband," she told the women around her, leaning forward so the diamond caught the chandelier light. "He brought it back from Dubai last year. One of a kind." It was at exactly 20 minutes past 9, in the middle of a story one of the guests was telling, that the lights went out. Not a flicker, a full blackout, immediate and total. The generator would kick in within 30 seconds, everyone knew, but in those 30 seconds the dining room was plunged into a darkness so thick you could hear people's breathing change. There were nervous laughs. Someone knocked over a glass. A woman said, on, is Nipa following people to Lekki now?" The generator rumbled to life. The lights came back. Madame Adeyemi's hand went to her throat. The necklace was gone. The silence that followed was the kind that starts in one person's face and spreads like cold water across a room. Madame stood up slowly, her hand still at her bare throat, and looked around the table with the measured calm of someone deciding how angry to be. "Where is my necklace?" she said. Quietly. Which was worse than shouting. What followed next happened with a speed that suggested it had been planned, though Amara did not understand that yet. Toby appeared from the corner of the room. He had been standing there the whole time, nursing a glass of whiskey, and said, with the kind of casual certainty that carries rooms, "We should check the staff first." And so they did. Bags were searched. Pockets were turned out. Each member of staff stood in a line in the entrance hall while Ngozi and Emeka conducted the search, watched by Toby and two of the male guests who had appointed themselves as an informal committee of oversight. When they reached Amara, she spread her arms and opened her bag herself, because she had nothing to hide. The necklace was in the inside pocket. Amara stared at it. For a full 3 seconds, she could not speak. Not because she was guilty and caught, but because the shock of being so perfectly, so completely set up, was physical. It hit her like a hand across the face. "Someone put it there," she said. Her voice was steady. "I didn't touch that necklace. Someone put it in my bag." "Interesting," said Toby, his voice smooth as expensive fabric. "How would someone put a necklace in your bag without you noticing?" The lights went out. "For 30 seconds, Toby said. "And in 30 seconds, you had enough time to reach across the table, unclasp my mother's necklace, and put it in your bag?" "Very busy 30 seconds. I was on the other side of the room. I wasn't anywhere near." "I told you," Toby said to his mother, not looking at Amara anymore. "I told you about this one from the beginning. I told you she couldn't be trusted." Madame turned to Amara, and the warmth that had been in her face all evening, the warmth of wine and good company and expensive jewelry, was completely gone. In its place was something flat and final. "Get out of my house," she said. "Madam, please listen to me. I have worked in this house for 2 weeks and I have never touched anything that wasn't mine. Please, just check the CCTV, please, just. Are you raising your voice at me in my own house?" Madame's voice sharpened. "After what you've done. Get out. Now. Before I involve the police." Amara was still talking when the gatemen came. She was still talking when they dragged her through the house. She was still talking when her bag was emptied and her uniform was stripped and she was handed her old dress through a crack in the gate. She talked because it was all she had left, because her words were the only thing they hadn't been able to take from her yet. But nobody listened. The gate closed. The rain came down. And Amara stood alone in the dark street in Lekki, her knees finally buckling, her back sliding down the wall until she was sitting on the wet ground with her face in her hands, and the thing she had promised herself she would never do again rose up in her chest and broke out of her in great, heaving, silent sobs. She didn't know how long she sat there. Long enough for the rain to soak through her dress. Long enough for the party sounds inside the gate to go quiet. Long enough to start wondering whether the caretaker at the orphanage had been right all along, that this was her ceiling, and she had been foolish to imagine otherwise. She heard the soft crunch of footsteps and looked up, ready to be told to move. It was the old gardener. Mr. Bello. She had barely spoken to him in her 2 weeks at the mansion. He was a small, wiry man somewhere in his 70s, with grey at his temples and a way of moving through the garden as though he and it had reached a private understanding. He had always nodded at her when they passed. He had never been cold. He was standing now with a large black umbrella held over both of them, looking down at her with an expression that was neither pity nor judgment. He held out a small nylon bag. "Chin chin and groundnut," he said simply. "Is all I have." Amara stared at him. "You should go back inside," she said. "If they see you talking to me." "I am 73 years old," Mr. Bello said, lowering himself carefully onto his haunches so he was level with her. "The only person who can tell me where to stand is God." He pressed the food into her hands. "Eat." She ate. Her hands were shaking. The groundnut tasted like every small mercy she had ever been given in her life, rare, and made sweeter by rarity. "You didn't take the necklace," Mr. Bello said. It was not a question. It was said with the simple confidence of a man stating the weather. Amara looked at him. "How do you know?" "I have worked in this compound for 11 years, he said. "I know who people are. I knew within 3 days of you arriving what kind of person you are. A thief does not mop floors at 5 in the morning. A thief does not spend their lunch break reading a small Bible with that kind of hungry face." He paused. "I believe you, my daughter." Those 3 words. "I believe you." They should not have undone her. She was 22 years old and had survived an orphanage and grinding poverty and years of false blame. But they did. They cracked something open in her chest that she hadn't known was still sealed, and she pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and looked away so he wouldn't see her face. "It doesn't matter," she said when she could speak. "No one else will believe me. Go and find somewhere dry to sleep tonight," Mr. Bello said, rising with the careful movements of a man who had made peace with his knees. "Come back here in the morning. There is a bench by the back garden wall. I will be there at 7. Don't give up before then." She almost didn't come. She lay on a bench in a nearby bus stop that night and stared at the underside of the corrugated iron roof while the rain slowed and stopped, turning over the logic of returning to a place that had humiliated her. But some stubborn, unreasonable thing that had survived every attempt life had made to kill it, got her up at 6:30 and brought her back to the back garden wall of the Adeyemi compound. Mr. Bello was already there. "Good," he said when he saw her. "Come." What she did not know, what no one knew, was that Mr. Bello had spent the previous night doing something very specific. The compound had 4 CCTV cameras, one at the main gate, one at the back entrance, one covering the courtyard, and one small camera in the corridor outside the main dining room. Mr. Bello had no special technology. What he had was 11 years of being invisible in a rich man's house, of being the kind of person powerful people forget is present, and a very good relationship with Chukwemeka, the CCTV operator who sat in the small security room near the generator house and who, like most men doing thankless work, responded warmly to someone who occasionally brought him food and remembered his name. That morning, Mr. Bello sat with Amara in the security room while Chukwemeka, nervous but curious, pulled up the previous night's footage on the monitor. They watched in silence. The corridor camera outside the dining room showed the normal flow of the evening, staff moving with trays, guests drifting to and from the bathroom. Then, at 8:47, more than 30 minutes before the blackout, there was a cut. A 12-second gap where the footage simply jumped, like a page torn from a book. "That's been edited," Mr. Bello said quietly. Chukwemeka leaned forward, his face tight. Whoever did this knew how to access the file. He scrolled back, watching the cut again. But they didn't do it perfectly. You can see the timestamp jump. What happened in those 12 seconds? Amara whispered. Chukwuemeka pulled up the corridor footage from earlier in the day, the uncut version from the morning archive, which had been overlooked. They scrubbed forward through the afternoon. And at 4:22, they found it. Toby Adeyemi walking down the corridor alone. Glancing once over his shoulder. Stopping at the small side table where the staff left their bags during the party setup. Opening a bag, the small brown leather bag that Amara always carried, and slipping something inside. Then walking away. Not hurrying. Not looking back. The casual confidence of someone who did not expect to be caught. Amara sat very still. She felt cold. "There's more," Mr. Bello said. "Tell her, Emeka." Chukwuemeka, who had clearly been doing his own quiet investigation all morning, pulled up a second piece of footage, this one from a phone screen he had screenshotted. It was a WhatsApp call log, and though he could not show the content of the messages, he had been in the security room 4 days earlier when Toby had stepped in to make a call, forgetting or not caring that Chukwuemeka was there. The call had been to someone he addressed as Uncle Dare, and the one sentence Chukwuemeka had heard clearly before Toby registered his presence and moved away was, "I need the 50 million before next month or they will come to the house." Gambling debt. Or something worse. And a diamond necklace that, insured and sold quietly, would go a long way. Amara stared at the screen. She thought of the slap. She thought of the rain. She thought of every face that had looked at her and seen a thief because she had grown up without parents and therefore, in the logic of a certain kind of cruelty, must deserve what happened to her. "What do we do?" she asked. "We wait," said Mr. Bello. "Chief Adeyemi is returning from London today. There is a gathering tomorrow evening, his business associates are coming to welcome him back. The whole family will be present. And you want to show this footage there? I want the truth to be shown where the lie was told," he said simply. The following evening, the Adeyemi compound was full again. Chief Adeyemi had returned, a tall, broad man with reading glasses and a quiet authority that was entirely different from his wife's loud control. He greeted his guests, accepted their congratulations on some new business deal, and settled into his chair at the head of the long sitting room with the ease of a man who considered the world well-ordered. He had not been told about Amara. Not the full story. Madam had mentioned, offhandedly, that a new housemaid had been caught stealing and removed. He had nodded and moved on. Mr. Bello entered the sitting room at 8 o'clock. The gathering had perhaps 20 people in it. Madam Adeyemi noticed him first and frowned. Mr. Bello had no business being inside the house, much less the main sitting room, much less during a gathering. "Bello," she said, sharpening his name, "what do you think you are doing?" "I am sorry to interrupt, Mom." His voice was steady. "But I need to show something to Chief and his guests. It will not take long. This is not the time. Please." He said it to the chief, not the madam. And something in his tone, the particular weight of a man with nothing to fear and nothing to gain, made Chief Adeyemi hold up one hand, silencing his wife. "Let him speak," the chief said. Toby, sitting across the room, had gone very still. Chukwuemeka came in behind Mr. Bello, carrying his laptop. He set it on the side table and opened the file without a word. The footage ran for less than 2 minutes. Nobody in the room spoke. The only sounds were the low hum of the generator and, somewhere outside, the distant call of a night bird. When it ended, the silence continued for another 5 seconds. Then Chief Adeyemi said, very quietly, "Play it again." They played it again. Toby stood up. "That footage is, that could be anyone, you can't clearly see." "That is your watch," his father said, without raising his voice. "The red leather strap. I bought it for your birthday 3 years ago. I know my own son's wrist." "Papa. Sit down." Toby sat down. Madam Adeyemi had not moved. She was sitting very straight, her hands folded in her lap, her face doing the complicated work of a woman watching two realities fight for dominance, the reality where her son was innocent and a dead girl from an orphanage was a thief, and the reality where the screen had just shown her something that could not be unseen. The second reality was winning, and losing it was costing her something visible. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "Toby," she said. Her voice had lost all its hardness. Toby looked at his mother's face. And whatever calculation he had been running in his head, whatever story he had prepared, seemed to dissolve on contact with that look. His shoulders dropped. He pressed his hand over his eyes. "I needed the money," he said. Very quietly. As if volume might make it more real. "I owe people. I've been trying to fix it without," he stopped. "I didn't think anyone would look that closely. She was an orphan. I thought." He did not finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room heard the end of it, even in its silence. He had thought no one would believe her. Amara had been standing in the doorway this whole time. Mr. Bello had brought her. She stood with her back very straight, wearing the same dress she had left the compound in 2 nights ago, and she watched Toby's face as the truth settled onto it. She felt many things in that moment, relief, and a burning grief, and the particular exhaustion of someone who has had to fight for a simple thing that should have been given freely. She did not feel triumph. She was too tired for triumph. But she did not bow her head. She stood straight, and she let them see her, and she did not apologize for being seen. Madame Adeyemi rose from her chair. She crossed the room slowly, and when she stopped in front of Amara, her face was open in a way Amara had not seen before, raw, and older, and stripped of performance. "I am sorry," she said. The words came out unsteady, like something she had to push through a narrow space. "I should have listened to you. I should have, I should not have." "I know, Ma," Amara said. And she did not say it coldly, and she did not say it warmly. She said it the way you acknowledge a fact that is true, that has always been true, and that changes nothing about what happened but matters nonetheless. Chief Adeyemi had stood while his wife spoke. Now he looked at Amara for a long moment with those quiet, reading glasses eyes. "I have been told you came from the Surulere government orphanage," he said. Amara said nothing. She waited. "I have also been told, by Bello, who has never lied to me in 11 years, that you came to this house with a purpose. That you wanted to go to university." She blinked. "Yes, sir." He looked at his son. Then he looked back at her. "I cannot undo what was done to you in this house. But I can do one thing." He paused. "You were the only honest person here. The only one who did not lie, did not scheme, did not take what wasn't theirs. That kind of character is rarer than any diamond." He glanced at his wife, and something passed between them. "My company has a scholarship program. It will cover your school fees, accommodation, and stipend for 4 years. If you want it." The room was very quiet. Amara looked at the floor for a moment. Then she looked up. Her eyes were bright, not with tears, though they were close, but with something that had been pressing against the inside of her for years, something that now, finally, had room to breathe. "I want it," she said. That night, sitting on the same back garden bench where Mr. Bello had first told her to wait, Amara looked up at the Lagos sky, its orange glow, its scattered stars barely visible through the haze, and thought about the shape of her life. She had grown up being told she was nothing. She had grown up watching people decide her story before she could open her mouth. And she had carried that story, had carried it through every door and every accusation and every moment of being dismissed, because no one had ever offered her a different one. Until one old man with chin and a black umbrella had stood in the rain and said 3 words. "I believe you." Not because he had proof. Not because it was safe. But because he had paid attention. Because he had looked at her, actually looked, the way most people never bother to, and seen what was real. Sometimes that is all it takes. One person who chooses to look closely, in a world that prefers to glance and move on. One person who extends the smallest mercy, a bit of food, a dry umbrella, 3 words, and in doing so, changes the entire direction of a life. Amara did not become a great woman because Chief Adeyemi gave her a scholarship. She became a great woman because she had refused, through everything, to become what the world expected of her. The scholarship just gave her the space to prove it. But it started with Mr. Bello. It started with kindness. It always does. If this story moved something in you, if you have ever been where Amara was, standing in the rain with the truth in your mouth and no one willing to hear it, then leave a comment below. Write one word, believe. Because somewhere out there, someone is still waiting for their Mr. Bello moment. And maybe your comment reminds them to hold on. If this video reached your heart, please like it, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you never miss a story. There are more stories like Amara's coming, stories about people who were counted out and found their way back. You do not want to miss them. Hit the bell, stay with us, and until next time, keep believing in people. Even when it costs you something. Especially then.